Hi, and welcome back to another edition of Shop Talk. Dave Toll being joined by Neil Rogers. Welcome, Neil.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're hanging out here at University Bikes.
One of my favorite places to be.
Yeah, this is a cool spot. A lot of history here.
Yes, so, Neil, already things are starting to hot up for the 2007 season. I know you've gotten some inside information on Tour of California that we can't talk about, but it sounds like there's some exciting things happening with that race to start off the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're going to see some pretty big Pro Tour names. I mean, we've Bettini we've seen thrown around, and nothing's been announced yet. But to have the world champion here, I mean, that would be
well. That's a great question. When is the last time a standing world champion raced in North America? I think you might have to go back to the '93 Lance Armstrong Motorola.
That's a really good question. Yeah,
it's been a while. I mean, we had Cipollini in Georgia, but he wasn't the current world champion. So I'm going to actually, maybe one of our viewers out there could let us know if I've got to be wrong.
Although coming into the 07 season, if you count time trials, Kristin Armstrong will be racing in the rainbow jersey more or less all season long.
Yeah.
See the jersey in the time trial.
Looking forward to 2007. That's going to be one of the highlights. I can't wait the first time that we see the Lipton rider rolling up to the start ramp. She really does deserve that. And actually, I give you guys credit, the editorial staff, for the last cover. I thought that was really cool to see Sarah Hammer, Jill Kintner, and Kristin Armstrong. Way to go.
Yeah, it's funny. You know, you try not to get starstruck in the world of cycling, but for whatever reason, anytime you see the rainbow jersey, it just catches your eye, and you just kind of feel it. I remember being at a Norba race, and Greg Menard was the world downhill champion. He walked into the press room looking for results, and I kind of looked up and saw that jersey, and was like, oh, world champion.
That says it all. Yeah. So, well, you know, and I'd heard some other things as well. You're talking about Paolo Bettini coming. Sounds like another Italian outfit might be here as well. I would not be too surprised if Backstedt and Filippo Pozzato were here. That's the Leaky Gas team. Just sort of rumors that we're hearing right now. Obviously, they've firmed it up, and there's always going to be winners and losers in these types of things. Is getting into California and Georgia right now has become pretty tough for some of our continental level teams.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of a mixed bag. It's interesting. I mean, obviously Tour of California, biggest race of the year, but you know, I've talked to like the Kodak Gallery Sierra Nevada guys. They have not been invited. That's official. And you know, some of the guys, it's like, hey, you know, sure, we'd love to be there, but to peak in February, I mean, it has lasting effects on the rest of the season. I spoke with Scott Moninger, who's riding for BMC, and right now he's kind of on the bubble as to whether or not he wants to go to California. I mean, he went last year. He was glad he went. But he said, hey, you know, to try to come up in February, the season ends. I mean, nationals are in September. He said, you know, it's not for me. Maybe not for me this year.
Yeah, and certainly I really hear where Scott is coming from in that the commitment to racing California. I think what you're talking about, there is no race that requires a bigger commitment because you've got to move back into the previous season, stop things early. Like you just had a great interview with Jesse Anthony. Well, Jesse finished racing mid-December at Cyclocross Nationals out in Providence. There's just the turnaround isn't possible to be ready to go in doing those kind of miles at that tempo in February.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what happens is these guys that are going well in California, you know, Philly week, and they go into Tour Utah, that sort of time of the year, and they just fall apart. I mean, you just can't sustain through the end of the season. I mean, you looked at, for example, Tour California was a big priority for the HealthNet team last year, and look at them at Nationals. I mean, there's nobody in the lead group.
At that point, the team had, you know, and also HealthNet is one of the teams that had quite a few non-American riders, and you do pay a price for that one day.
Hey, speaking of HealthNet and non-American riders, I just had a chat with Australian Hank Vogels, who's actually moving back to Boulder. And
Toyota United,
Toyota United. But he said the guy to look out for in 2007 is Rory Sutherland. He said that guy is amazing. He's incredibly strong, and he said he will be one of the top 3 guys in North America in 2007. So you heard it here first.
Well, there you go. And I tell you, that's another very interesting guy on that team is Canadian rider Hejdahl as well, who've been paying his dues over in Europe. So Nathan O'Neill sounds like he's going to have some serious support this year.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's interesting too because I actually spoke with Jeff Corbett, the team director at HealthNet. And, you know, the Tour of California, there's a high percentage of riders from down under because they're coming off their southern hemisphere summer, and so they're flying. So you're going to see guys like Sutherland or Nathan O'Neill or Heath Blackgrove or Toyota United. You know, those are going to be the go-to guys.
So what do you think about this thought, Neil, as far as Tour of California goes? You know, you've got your guys like Dave Zabriskie and your Christian Vandevelds. Obviously, they'll be there with CSC this year. Those guys, by you know, their level of form, is so much higher to begin with. Maybe that doing a race like Tour of California is maybe better suited for them as they're getting ready for a European campaign, whereas a rider in America, Tour of California, is probably going to be the biggest race that you do all year. So Zabriskie's not peaking for California, where someone like Moniger probably would be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right, and I think that's where that kind of decision comes in. I mean, obviously, teams are looking for the exposure. And they want to race at the highest level, but then I mean it really does throw a monkey wrench in the rest of the season's plans in terms of form.
Well, we'll be talking a lot more about the Amgen Tour of California in the next few weeks, that's for sure. I wanted to jump forward to an event that's going to be taking place in April, right before the Tour de Georgia, the U.S. Open of cycling. And I got an email from Tim Miller today saying good news is on the way. So it sounds like with that NBC deal, 2.5 hours live on a Saturday afternoon is unheard of.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that it sounds like the sponsors are reacting to that incredible turn of events, and hopefully we'll have a race that everyone in America can watch on NBC.
It is pretty funny that there was all that speculation what's going to happen after Lance Armstrong retires. Is there going to be this giant vacuum? And in 2007, I mean, we've got essentially 5 week-long stage races. You've got California, Georgia, Utah, Missouri, and the Canadian race.
Yeah, but Montreal-Boston, which is that race is a bit of an enigma right now. I think USA Cycling is trying to come to grips with what's going on here. This race is, I think, 2/3 of the race will be in the United States, but it's being managed by the Canadians. But I think that there's something with the UCI where they're very comfortable with that group in Canada.
And then you've got this new U.S. Open race.
U.S. Open coming up.
I mean, there's bigger and better races than ever before.
If you go back and look, it gets really kind of interesting. You're talking about the post-Lance vacuum. Well, I think that in a way, the Lance hype that was going on in 2004, 2005, I think that's what paved the road for us now, because I work for every race that you've mentioned doing live announcing, and I know that the Tour de Georgia came about because there was a man in the state government there that was inspired by watching Lance Armstrong at the Tour de France, wins 1, 2, and 3, really got him into it, and that race is a legacy event at this point. Tour of California, I don't think you could directly say it was because of someone being inspired by Lance, but I think in general, Lance inspired them.
I think AEG saw the opportunity there.
The high end of the sport and they believe that the high end could even go higher here in the United States.
Yeah.
And in the Utah race, there's people involved with that race that are Jason Preston and the rest of that crew. I think a lot of them are very much Lance Armstrong fans. So thanks a lot, Lance. I'm pretty appreciative. As a matter of fact, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it weren't for Lance Armstrong.
I was just actually kind of going back and looking over Dan Coyle's Lance Armstrong's War.
Yeah,
have you read that book?
I did.
Yeah, and then you got a couple mentions there, not necessarily by name, but I was reading back to when Armstrong won the sprint stage in Rome.
It's funny.
He talked about the throaty announcer. I know that throaty announcer.
That was a classic because we couldn't figure out who it was. Like it seems like minutes, it's actually seconds. But you're sitting there, and then I'm like, well, he's wearing the 1. He's got the 1 designation. That's always the team leader. That's Armstrong.
And he's in the blue and red.
Yeah, shocking the world.
Man, what a book, Dan Coyle's Lance Armstrong War.
How's your book coming?
Well, it's a work in progress, but I will say I've been very inspired. I mean, he did a really nice job. I have nothing but the highest of compliments. It's really inspiring to see somebody put that much effort into a project like that.
Well, I think we got to wrap this up. It's amazing how fast time flies here at U-Bikes. But Neil, thanks a lot, and I want to talk more about 2007 because we didn't even talk about the Tour of Missouri yet or the Tour of Utah. So obviously it's a very exciting year. For Neil Rogers, I'm Dave Toll, and we'll see you on the road.